The FBI's secret files on Marilyn Monroe. They reveal some of her friends were suspected communists, and she once considered
For years, he kept quiet. In an industry built on gossip, where whispers could build or break legends, Robert Mitchum carried his truth like a locked vault. He was the man who rarely gave too much away, on screen or off it. But when he finally opened up about Marilyn Monroe, Hollywood held its breath. This wasn't just another celebrity tale. This was a story that had lived in silence for decades, buried beneath fame, myth, and golden age glamour. Mitchum's connection with Monroe was unlike the rumors that circled around her name. It wasn't scandalous. It was human, layered with respect, pain, and an honesty few dared to speak. Before this revelation, there was a man born into hardship, shaped by the road, and transformed into one of the most iconic figures in film noir. To understand his words about Marilyn, you first have to understand Robert Mitchum himself. Robert Charles Derman. Mitchum was born on August 6, 1917 in Bridgeport, Connecticut. His story didn't begin with red carpets or bright lights. It began with loss. When Robert was just a toddler, tragedy struck. His father, James Thomas Mitchum, died in a railroad accident. The family was left to navigate the harsh reality of the Great Depression with little more than grit and hope. His mother, Anne Harriet Gunderson Mitchum, was a determined woman. She raised Robert and his siblings with a stern but loving hand, teaching them to stand tall against life's blows. There was no safety net, no privilege, just survival. The weight of responsibility fell early on Robert's small shoulders, shaping the resilience that would define him later in life. The streets and back roads of Depression-era America were his classroom. Hunger taught him resourcefulness. Poverty taught him pride. And hardship carved a quiet fire inside him. These were not glamorous beginnings. They were raw, unforgiving, and real. Before he ever stepped onto a film set, Robert Mitchum was a boy who learned to live without asking the world for permission. By the time he turned 14, Robert Mitchum had no interest in staying still. He was restless, not out of rebellion alone, but because the world called to him. With little more than the clothes on his back, he hopped onto freight trains, joining thousands of young drifters crossing a struggling nation. These were not joyrides. The road was brutal. Mitchum slept in empty boxcars, worked odd jobs, and got into more than a few fights along the way. He dug ditches, boxed for money, ghost-wrote poetry, and wandered with a poet's soul wrapped in a fighter's body. His journey was part survival, part search for meaning. At one point, his wandering led him to a southern chain gang after being arrested for vagrancy, a moment that could have broken him but only made him tougher. He learned what it meant to be invisible, to live on the edges of society, to see the world through eyes unclouded by privilege. This era didn't just shape his character, it became his character. Years later, when audiences watched him play outlaws, drifters, and men living in the shadows, they weren't just seeing an actor, they were seeing the boy who had already lived those stories. Robert Mitchum's path to Hollywood wasn't a glamorous dream. It was more like fate bumping into him. In the early 1940s, after wandering, working, and surviving, he married Dorothy Spence, the woman who would remain his partner for life. The couple moved to California, where Mitchum found work at Lockheed Aircraft during the war years. It was stable, honest work. But there was something inside him that didn't quite fit the mold of an ordinary life. To earn extra money, he began helping out in local theater productions. At first, it was just for fun, but his deep, smooth baritone voice and quiet charisma caught people's attention. He had something magnetic, something that didn't need polish to shine. Soon, small roles followed in B-movies and stage plays. He didn't chase Hollywood. Hollywood found him. By the mid-1940s, Mitchum signed with RKO Pictures, and his face began appearing on big screens. In 1944, his role in 30 Seconds Over Tokyo earned critical notice. The following year, his powerful performance in The Story of G.I. Joe secured him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. The Drifter had become an actor, and not just any actor, one who carried the weight of reality in every glance. By the late 1940s, Robert Mitchum was no longer a name whispered in studio offices. He was the man who embodied the cool, effortless, mysterious leading man. His style was unlike anything Hollywood had seen. While others performed, he simply existed on screen. A single glance, a subtle shift of his jaw, a line delivered in that calm baritone could say more than a page of dialogue. He became a cornerstone of film noir, starring in classics like Out of the Past, 1947, Crossfire, 1947, and The Big Steal, 1949. His characters were tough, cynical, sometimes broken, but always undeniably human. Audiences saw a man who didn't need to shout to own the room. Critics praised his minimalism in an era that loved theatrics. But Mitchum wasn't playing a part. He was simply channeling the man forged by hardship. Hollywood adored him, but he never seemed intoxicated by the glitz. While others chased fame, he walked through it like a man passing through smoke. He was present but not possessed by it. His aura wasn't built in press rooms. It came from something older, rawer, more real. As his star rose, so did his legend. And with it came the complicated dance between fame, privacy, and rebellion. In 1948, the Hollywood world stopped buzzing and started whispering. Robert Mitchum had been arrested for marijuana possession, a scandal that could have ended most careers at the time. The industry wasn't kind to such incidents. One headline could destroy everything, but Mitchum wasn't like everyone else. He didn't apologize. He didn't perform contrition for the cameras. He faced it with the same calm defiance that had always defined him. He served a short jail sentence, emerged with a smirk rather than shame, and walked straight back into Hollywood. Ironically, the scandal didn't destroy him. It made him larger than life. His bad boy image wasn't manufactured. It was real, and audiences loved him even more for it. He became the rebel star, the man who didn't play by the rules of the industry or society. While others tried to polish their image, Mitchum leaned into the smoke and shadows. He was who he was, unapologetic, authentic, and unforgettable. Through the 1950s and 1960s, Robert Mitchum proved time and again that he wasn't just another leading man. He was a force of nature. One of his most memorable roles came in 1954, when he starred opposite Marilyn Monroe in River of No Return. Their chemistry on screen was undeniable, electric in its simplicity. Monroe was at the height of her beauty, and Mitchum, calm, grounded, steady, balanced her brilliance like a steady flame beside a fire. A year later, in 1955, Mitchum terrified audiences in The Night of the Hunter. His chilling portrayal of the murderous preacher Harry Powell remains one of the most unforgettable performances in cinema history. Critics called it haunting. Viewers called it unlike anything they'd ever seen. And then came 1962. In Cape Fear, Mitchum embodied menace itself as Max Cady, a vengeful ex-con whose quiet, relentless cruelty crawled under your skin. These roles weren't just performances. They were masterclasses in control, presence, and power. Over the decades, he worked across genres: westerns, thrillers, war films, and noirs. But no matter the role, Mitchum brought an authenticity that few could match. His legacy wasn't built on overacting. It was built on underplaying, letting silence do the talking. Today, when actors are praised for subtlety and gravitas, they walk in footsteps he carved long before them. He didn't just act. He defined a way of being. Despite his fame, Robert Mitchum remained untouched by Hollywood vanity. He never believed his own legend. Friends described him as funny, kind, and disarmingly down-to-earth. He'd rather share a drink at a quiet bar than attend a glamorous party. He loved Dorothy Spence deeply, remaining married to her his entire life, a rare thing in Hollywood's revolving door romances. He raised his children with the same grit and humor he lived by. While cameras saw a mysterious, rugged icon, those close to him saw a man who loved fishing, poetry, and simple pleasures. He never tried to be anyone else. And perhaps that's why he endured long after trends faded. For years, Robert Mitchum avoided talking about Marilyn Monroe. They had shared the screen, shared quiet conversations between takes, and shared a mutual respect that wasn't for public display. When he finally broke his silence, he didn't speak of scandal. He spoke of her humanity. "People thought they knew Marilyn," he once said softly, "but they only knew the picture. The real woman. She was fragile. She wanted to be taken seriously. She didn't always trust the world, and for good reason." He described her not as the blonde bombshell Hollywood built, but as a person, a woman with dreams, fears, and a heart too soft for the cruelty around her. His words weren't sensational. They were tender, and in that moment, the legend of Monroe became a little more human. Through Mitchum's eyes, she wasn't just a star. She was real. Legends like Robert Mitchum don't need to shout to be remembered. They leave echoes, subtle, strong, and lasting. His journey from the railroads of the Great Depression to the golden lights of Hollywood was built not on image, but on truth. When he spoke about Marilyn Monroe, he didn't just reveal her. He revealed himself, the man behind the myth, the observer who saw the world quietly and deeply. Mitchum's name stands as a reminder of a different kind of stardom, one built on presence, not performance. And though the cameras have long stopped rolling, the stories, his and hers, still linger like smoke from an old film reel, refusing to fade away. On screen, Robert Mitchum was the picture of control, cool, unreadable, untouchable. But away from the flashbulbs, the reality was far more complex. He wasn't a man chasing attention. He was a man who often ran from it. While the press painted him as a rebel, those close to him knew a quieter soul. He hated publicity tours, disliked interviews, and loathed being boxed into a single image. This duality became a part of his mystique. The world adored the idea of Mitchum, the mysterious man who didn't care. But in truth, he cared deeply about the few people who mattered to him. He was honest to a fault, never sugarcoating who he was. That rawness made him unpredictable, sometimes difficult, but always real. In a city built on make-believe, Robert Mitchum was unapologetically himself, and that made him unforgettable. Being one of Hollywood's most magnetic men meant that rumors followed Robert Mitchum like a shadow. Whispers of affairs, secret romances, and legendary nights out filled the gossip columns. But Mitchum himself never entertained the circus. He neither confirmed nor denied. He simply moved through it, silent, composed, untouchable. His real love story was simple. Dorothy Spence. Married in 1940, they weathered storms that would have broken many Hollywood couples. While the industry whispered, he stood by his family, choosing loyalty over spectacle. But there were friendships that became the stuff of legend. His camaraderie with fellow stars, including Marilyn Monroe, was built on mutual respect rather than the scandal the tabloids imagined. He had a knack for seeing people beyond their public masks. That's what made his bond with Monroe so unique. He didn't chase headlines. Headlines chased him. Robert Mitchum wasn't just part of Hollywood, he was part of an era that defined it. The 1940s and 1950s were the years when movie stars were larger than life. Studios controlled everything, gossip was gold, and legends were born on black and white screens. Mitchum rose during this time, but unlike many of his peers, he never became a puppet of the system. While other stars played the game, Mitchum remained an outsider with a leading man's face. He was signed to contracts, yes, but he didn't let them own him. His resistance to Hollywood's rules made him stand out in a time when conformity was expected. He embodied the spirit of film noir, a man both in the spotlight and in the shadows. His every role captured the tension of that golden era. Beauty wrapped in darkness, glamour brushed with grit. Mitchum wasn't just acting in the golden age, he was shaping it. While many stars faded with time, Robert Mitchum adapted. As the decades shifted and Hollywood evolved, he refused to be boxed in by nostalgia. The 1970s and 1980s saw a new generation of actors, but Mitchum remained a towering figure. He transitioned from the brooding leading man to the commanding elder statesman of cinema. His presence alone could elevate a film. Audiences who had grown up watching him in smoky black and white now admired him in color. Older, Wiser, but still carrying that same unshakable charisma. He took on television roles, miniseries, and more mature parts, proving that real talent doesn't fade with age, it deepens. While some actors struggled to stay relevant, Mitchum simply kept being himself, and that was enough. Even as trends changed, his performances felt timeless, like a familiar song that never loses its power. Robert Mitchum never chased trophies, but the world gave them to him anyway. Though famously indifferent to awards, his talent didn't go unnoticed. He received an Academy Award nomination early in his career, and as time passed, countless critics, filmmakers, and institutions acknowledged his contribution to cinema. What set him apart was that he never let accolades define him. While some actors lived for the applause, Mitchum lived for the work. He didn't collect awards like trophies. He collected moments, raw, unfiltered, unforgettable moments on screen. He earned a place in the pantheon of greats, not because he tried to, but because greatness was simply part of him. Robert Mitchum's shadow still lingers in Hollywood. You can see traces of his quiet strength and dangerous charm in countless modern actors. From the anti-heroes of the 1970s to today's complex, morally gray leads, many owe their style to the path Mitchum carved. Directors admired his subtlety, his ability to command without forcing it. Actors studied his stillness, how a man could say so much without uttering a word. Legends like Clint Eastwood, Al Pacino, and Robert De Niro followed a blueprint he helped write. Even decades later, film schools still teach his performances in The Night of the Hunter and Cape Fear as masterclasses in control. Mitchum didn't just live in his era. He became the blueprint for what came after. In his final years, Robert Mitchum didn't seek the spotlight. He spent his time surrounded by family, enjoying the quiet he had always valued. The cameras had dimmed, but the legend remained. Even as age caught up with him, that unmistakable presence never faded. When he appeared on screen, audiences felt it, that rare, quiet power. He left behind a filmography rich with unforgettable characters and a legacy built on authenticity. When he passed, Hollywood didn't just lose an actor. It lost one of its last true originals. Robert Mitchum was never just a star. He was a feeling, a presence, a reminder of a time when Hollywood was raw and real. He lived without pretending, acted without performing, and inspired without trying. His story isn't about perfection. It's about power, the kind that comes from simply being yourself in a world that wants to make you someone else. Decades may pass, but legends like Mitchum don't fade. They linger in the smoke, in the silence between lines, in the way a glance can shake an entire scene. He spoke softly. The world still hears him loudly,